All right, on the top of your paper, I need you to like label it this way. Say using, I don't know why, we're gonna do this one. So using completing the square to write equations of circles. All right, so we're going to use completing the square to write equations of the circle. Do you guys even remember that term? You guys ever, at all in your past, remember that term? Nope. So I guess we're going to have a refresher course. Does that sound good? All right. So in refresher course model, I am going to give you 2 examples. So I'm going to act like you haven't seen algebra for a year. Oh, wait, you haven't. Okay. So we're going to go back, and it's literally going to be the first page is baby step. Remember when second page is actually applying it. Everyone got head shakes with me on that? Everyone with me? Okay, good. So first things first. We're using the idea of quadratic equations, okay? Quadratics when you're working with it. If I have an equation like this, y squared minus 6y plus 2 is equal to 0. There are times when you have a quadratic equation, can factoring work to solve it? Sometimes. In this case, can I factor to solve this? Can I? Can I factor to solve that quadratic? The answer is no. What 2 numbers of 2 and 1 can I combine somehow to get a -6, right? They can't add. 2 plus 1 is going to add to 3 no matter what I do. So I cannot use it in this case. So what did we do when we could not solve quadratic equations with factoring? What rule did we introduce to you? Quadratic formula. So let's try the quadratic formula, okay? So let's do that first. Now remember, this is using the idea that every quadratic can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, can anyone remember their quadratic formula? Most of you learned it with a song. Yep, that was it basically. The problem is if I start saying it, I will sing it to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel and it won't come out being said. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do it without doing it with a weird rhythm, okay, when you're doing it. Remember when you're doing this, that whole complicated formula right here for the quadratic equation. All right, need to remember though what are A, B, and C. And this is a formula that your teachers do expect you to remember. Okay, and this is just one of those fail-safes when you can't factor, hint, hint, for later homeworks in the next week and a half. If something doesn't factor, you use the quadratic. What's A, what's B, and what's C? Well, in this case, A is going to equal 1 because A is in front of the y squared. B, in this case, is a -6. It's in front of the y, and C is always your constant value. So those 3 numbers are what I have to plug into my quadratic formula. So when we do this, I get opposite, so I get a -6 plus or minus, parentheses galore on this so we don't lose track of negative signs. We plug in our A, which is 1, and C is 2, all over, oops, I forgot over 2A, I totally forgot my A there. And then go 2 times 1. I'm showing what I'm doing here. Thank you. We're totally good. Guys, what's opposite a -6? A +6. Guys, come on, make sure we get the numbers right. +6. Then we have to do order of operations inside our parentheses too. We have to do exponents first. What's a -6 squared? 36. Minus, well, we got 4 times 1 times 2. Isn't that 8? And then we have all over 2 times 1, which is 2. So we're getting a little bit better, nicer numbers. So then I get here, 6 plus or minus the square root of, well, 36 minus 8 is what? 28 all over 2. Now, with that, I have to make sure everything's in simplest form. Is everything in simplest form? No, what's wrong? I can divide by 2 right now to anything except for the 6. And if I can't divide the 2 to the square root of 28, I can't do it. What do I have to do first before I can do anything else mathematically? I have to simplify my radical. The rules stay the same. Radicals have to be in simplest form. So when you're doing that, you got 6 plus or minus, what's this Square root of 28. What perfect square number comes out? 4, right? What's the square root of 4? 2 root 7. All over 2. Now I can simplify. Now I can go, does 2 divide into the 6, and does 2 divide into the 2? Yes. So then that can simplify down to, what do we have here? 3 plus or minus the square root of what? That's your actual work. Can't factor it. That's your option. Now, a lot of you are like, holy cow, that's been a while. Right? But believe it or not, in an advanced level geometry class, I do expect you, after one example, to remember how to do the quadratic formula. That's not what we're using today, though. That was just to remind you that you're supposed to know how to use that. We're going to use a method that you also learned that's called completing the square. So we're going to solve the exact same quadratic. So y squared minus 6y plus 2 equals 0 by a process called completing the square. Now, most algebra have taught you this. Most algebra teachers have taught you. If you have not, you're going to have to catch on really fast. Okay? Now, using this, we're going to use the idea of what's called perfect square trinomials. And let me remind you where a perfect square trinomial comes in, so you don't have to write this down, just watch. A perfect square trinomial is a number I get from squaring a trinomial. Okay? This is where you're coming up earlier. All right. So if I was squaring this, wouldn't I have to write it this way? Right? And then I'd FOIL and I'd get x squared minus 6x plus 9. That's a perfect square trinomial. So what we're going to try to do in completing the square is we want to go backwards. We want to go from here to there. That's my rule. Okay? Trust me, it's all about patterns. Okay? It's all about patterns. Because what are some of those patterns? Both of those have to have the same sign and they have to have the same numbers. Okay? So that's where we're going to go. So the first thing you do when you do this, so I'm going to write my equation down because you should always write your equation down, is you do not want the constant to be, now this is where I always yell, you put everything to the same side to factor. Remember, this isn't factorable. You do not want the constant on the left side. You want to move it over, but leave a space, okay? So we go, move it over and then go plus blank. We need to have a blank there. Equals a negative 2, and then put another plus blank. Because remember the rules about equations still have to hold true. If I do it to one side, I have to do it to what? Otherwise, it doesn't stay balanced, and we're doing it in proper manner. Then you use the rule, and this is where it's a little bit different, is you look at the term in front of the y. Okay? You see that negative 6? Does everyone see the negative 6? Divide it by 2. What do you get? Negative 3. This is what I need for you to do. Square it. So this will always be our pattern. Divide it by 2. Take that number and square it. What's a negative 3 squared? That goes in here. There's your plus 9. But if I put it on the left side, I have to do it where? On the right side. Does that y squared minus 6y plus 9 look really familiar from up above? Isn't that a perfect square trinomial? Look right here, guys. Do I have the same thing right there? It's just with a y instead of a what?
Should you always divide by 2? Or?
Always divide by 2. In order to do a perfect square trinomial, you always have to do that. So then here's my next step, and this is where it's fun. My next step is I write it as that binomial. How do I know what to put in for this binomial? Well, here's the pattern. It's so easy. You put your y here, and then this is all you have to do. You see that negative 3? Voila. That's what goes in. Square it, because again, go back to our example up above here, right? Up above here, what do we have? We have this x squared minus 6x plus 9, but I know, where did it come from? The x minus 3 squared, right? Look at that. Well, now what's a negative 2 plus 9? 7. Okay. Now, stop for a moment. Doesn't that almost look like a part of my equation of a circle? Doesn't it? Because don't we have a parenthesis? We have like a y minus k squared. That's the process we're going to get to. We're going to get to this point. But I'm going to show you how to finish this, okay? Just because I don't want you to get to algebra 2 and think I didn't teach you something, okay? How would I solve for y at this point? Well, if it's squared on both sides, take the what? All right, so now I'm going to go to the next step, and I'm going to finish solving for it. So I'm going to square on both sides. But don't forget your plus and what? Minus. Now, the square root of a squared, this comes out as y minus 3. This one comes out as b plus or minus the square root of what? 7. I need to get y by itself. What's y going to be? 3 what? Does that look really familiar to what we just did up above? You know what? This should not be an x. This should be a what, guys? A y on that one. Sorry about that. Bad variables on there. Did I get the same answer either using the quadratic formula or completing the square? All right, but let me tell you where our goal is again. Our goal is to get to this. Our goal is not to solve the equation. Our goal is to make it look like what we did on our previous notes. All right, are you ready to do a couple of these with me? And then I'm gonna let you crank them out with friends, okay? Because I don't want you doing this by yourself because this is hard. All right, so this is hard. All right, so let's try the next one. So let's actually do this. So here would actually be the equations. It says the following. Write the following as an equation of a circle in standard form. All right, so remember standard form is x minus h squared plus the quantity y minus k squared equals the radius squared. With me so far? Now, are you ready to see the following? This is going to be the following. I'm going to have an x squared minus 4x plus y squared plus 4y plus 6 is equal to 0. If you're currently in algebra, college algebra and algebra 2, you just finished this unit. This is how they saw the equations of circles start almost every single time. We've got to change it so it looks like the one with parentheses. So here's the only thing that means. How many sets of parentheses do I have when I have an equation of a circle? 2. So how many times do you think I have to complete the square? Twice. If it's not 0. Let me show you some examples with this. All right, so first things first. You cannot have a constant number. So that means no variable with it on the side when you're doing completing the square. So we're going to rewrite things to make it work for us, okay? And if this sounds like Mr. McDonald a little bit, it's because he taught me to do it this way. So forgive me if I sound so much like Mr. McDonald. But here's what we're going to do first. First things first, you always put your x's together. You always put your y variables together, right? So when I have this, I'm going to go x squared minus 4x plus blank. Because remember, I need to make a trinomial. Plus y squared plus 4y plus blank. Now, what in the world did I just do? Well, remember, where does the 6 have to move? Other side. So I got negative 6. Now, how many blanks did I put in? So guess how many I need on the other side? 2. I know I've been blowing your mind away. We're doing some fun algebra stuff, but it's been a while. All right, so now let's take this one step at a time. All right, what am I going to do with that negative 4? I'm going to divide by what number? So negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative what? 2. What's a negative 2 times a negative 2? So if I put a 4 here, what do I have to put on the other side? 4. Awesome. Yes. A lot of things, but not every. No, because you have to actually have a quadratic. So you have to have something squared in order to do it. But yeah, it's kind of cool. It's just another tool is really what it is. All right, so on this next one, we have to do it for y as well. So we take a positive 4 this time and divide by 2. And do we get a positive 2? And then what do we do to it? So remember, that's being squared. I'm going to put this here just so you remember. You don't have to show all this work. I'm doing it so you can see where I'm getting the numbers from. And so if I put a plus 4 there, I also have to put a plus 4 where? All right, so now it's time to make it look like our circle. All right, on the right-hand side, that should be the easiest thing. What's a negative 6 plus 4 plus 4? 2. Good, I'm going to actually write this a little bit lower. So it's 2. Great. Now I'm to the point where I should have my two sets of parentheses. All right? So remember, we wrote a perfect square trinomial here, and I want to show what binomial got it right there. So the first things first, this is where it makes it really easy for us. We know that's going to have to be an x, right? Now, what do I put in there? A plus 2, minus 2, what do I put? The minus 2, because what was here? And the minus 2 is what I squared. So you just literally go minus 2. Now, I'm going to do the same thing for my completing the square right here. Instead of x, obviously I'm going to put a y there. But this time, what am I going to put for my sign? Yeah, it's going to be plus 2. Does this look familiar now? Is that an equation of a circle? All right, what's your center for that circle? Careful, 2 what? Yeah, so if I looked at this, the center of this is going, well, that's very blue. The center for this is going to be at 2, -2, and my radius is at what? Root 2, right? So the square root of 2. Guys, that took a little bit of time, but wasn't impossible. All right, let's do one more. And then you guys are going to, I'm giving you a hard example. Did everyone hear me on this? On purpose, because you all have some of these together. All right, so let's do another one of these. All right, here's your equation. I get 2y squared minus 8y plus 2x squared minus 10x minus 10 is equal to 0. Now, here's the first things first. Do you notice something in front of your x squared and your y squared? And there's a number. Every example I've done for you so far, is there a number in front? No. I don't want a number in front, so how do I get rid of it? Divide everything by what? Every single one of those is going to be divided by 2. So I get y squared minus 4y plus x squared minus 5x minus 5 is equal to 0. First things first is I cannot have any numbers in front of my x squared and y squared if I'm going to do this, because that's not an equation of a circle. So I had to divide everything by 2. Now, is this in the right order? Does anyone feel like this is just too scrambled? All right, so let's put it in the right order. You put your x squared first, minus 5x, and then a plus what? Plus blank, right? Because I want to have over there. And then I have a y squared minus 4, excuse me, plus y squared. I make sure I use my sign right. Plus y squared minus 4y plus what? Blank equals, all right, notice that -5, it didn't disappear. Where did it go? It's the other side. And how many plus blanks do I need? So I get this to right. Yeah. Plus blank, plus blank. All right. Now is it starting to look a little bit more like what we did? All right, so what's the rule? What's the process to make a perfect square trinomial here? What do I got to do? By 2. Oh, look, that's a -5 over 2. Guess what you leave it as? -5 over 2. But what do I have to do to it? Square it. So numerator squared, denominator squared. What's a -5 times -5? 2 times 2. 25 over 4. Guess what I put over here on this side? 25 what? 25, oh, please don't mess up on me now, Pin. 25 over 4. Awesome. Okay. Now, can I do completing the square for the y? What do I do to my -4? Divide by 2 and it gives me a negative what? But what do? I have to take that -2 and square it so I get a 4. All right, again, if you don't write these bottom steps, that's okay, but writing those bottom steps help people write it in the parentheses better. Let's get to the point. We're ready for the equation of a, believe it or not, of the circle. Let's look at the first one. I want to write this one as, remember, as a binomial. Is it going to be x what? Remember, it's this value, right? The over 2. So it's going to be x equal minus, excuse me, not x equal, x minus 5 over 2 squared plus, now I need my other set of parentheses. Remember, we're going to go for the y. I want you to look a little more familiar to what we're working with. I'm gonna have a y, what? Minus 2, right? Squared. Now, those of you who are not good with fractions, would this be a time to put this in your calculator so you still have a fraction for your ratio? What do you guys think? If not, I mean, common denominator, the common denominator is just going to be 4 every single time. Anytime you do complete the square, your common denominator is going to be 4 for what we're doing. What did you guys get for your fraction? Yep. Congratulations, you just wrote an equation of a circle. The first one was the equation of a circle, but not in a format that we could pull out information that we want. This allows us to do that. So guys, what's your center of that circle? 5/2, 2. My radius is going to be the square root of 61/4, which means I rewrite it like this to simplify it. And it's square root of 61/2. There's your radius. All right. Are you guys willing to try? All right, this is where I need you to go. I need you to go in the homework assignment for lesson 11-7. I need you to pull up an equation. There's 2 worksheets. You have your just equations of circles worksheet and the completing the square. So how many worksheets is there for homework? 2. So could you, remember you can download more than one thing on an assignment, so don't be afraid to do that. So right now I want you to pull up the completing the square one.